Well, let's have a look at how we make our Markdown files now and in Orion. Here I have logged into Orion with the two windows we always have looking into the Orion system. Here's a terminal window like this. You can see I'm in a folder here. If I print working directory, this is my home folder, and I have obviously now created a subfolder called assignment 2 and maneuvered into it. So this is where I am now. And inside this folder, there are obviously two files. This looks like a Markdown file, and here looks like a shell script. And actually, this is just a copy of the shell script from module 5, the first one there. So it's not really assignment 2 shell script yet, but it's a good start, right? The other window, this is the terminal window. We always have that open, and in addition, we also have the RStudio window, you could say, open into Orion. These are two windows into the same system. So RStudio will behave more or less as you're used to on your own local computer. It's not a very big difference between the RStudio you run on Orion and whatever you run on your local computer. And you can see I am here also in the same folder, the home folder, this tilde or wave-like sign. It's an alias of your home. So I'm also in the assignment 2 folder here, and the same folder is viewed here in my file viewer here. And if you want to make sure this is the working folder, so you can do like this here, right? Like you can always do in RStudio. And here I have actually opened now this Markdown file, and it's quite empty right now, right? But here I'm ready now to start filling in for assignment 2, for instance. And you create our Markdown files in exactly the same way here as you do locally here. And that's something you will do. We will also from time to time make ordinary R scripts. And we will quite often make shell scripts in RStudio. So RStudio is our sort of working bench, you could say. But in addition, we need the terminal for starting and handling, starting the jobs and handling the file output and so on. But apart from that, everything is done here in RStudio. So what I was going to tell you a little bit about is our Markdown documents in general, and also for things which is a little bit special now. Minimizing output. Okay, typically we have R chunks in our R Markdown documents. And R chunk is simply a piece of code, or it's between these three tags here, right? Ticks. And it says R inside here, indicating that the code that comes here now should be R code. For instance, this one. Library tidyverse. We use the tidyverse packages quite often. So this is not a bad way of starting an R code. I almost always do it like this. And you can, of course, here you fill in text, right? And then you have the R chunk here. Let me save and knit this document now. I can save it like that, and then I knit here with the knit button. This is all the same as you're used to. And the point of doing this is to demonstrate this excessive output you get by loading a package like that. And this is something we don't really want to see in the report, right? This is noise in the report. How can we avoid it? Well, you avoid it by going into the header of the chunk and put in, for instance, this one, message equals false, like this, right? And the effect of this is, if I knit again now, let me save and knit again, save and knit. The code is executed, but the messaging is turned off. And that's nicer, right? So please do that. You can also add, for instance, warning equals false like this. You don't have to, an F is enough. In case you have some code that produces lots of warnings, which is not really, warnings are not crucial, right? They are just warnings. And it's the hassle to have them in the report sometimes. They can turn that off. There are lots of these chunk header options that you can learn about if you ask an AI or search on the internet for learning about this. There are a huge number of these options you can put into your chunk headers to influence how it will behave when you are knitting the document. Notice that you can always run the code by just pushing this button, right? Inside here. And that's not really entirely the same as knitting. You can always run the code regardless of what you have specified up here. It will not necessarily affect the running of the code that you get by clicking here. It's only when you knit the document. That's a slightly different way, because then you restart a new R session. But remember that. Turn off excessive output. Here's another thing. Sometimes, let me make a new R chunk here. As you saw in the first assignment as well, there are sometimes R code that takes a long time to execute. Right? The code inside a chunk takes a long time to execute. Let me put in some code here, which is okay. It's not very long time to execute, but at least there is some code. Imagine there was some code here that take a long time to execute. When you knit the document for the first time, you can execute this code, but when you re-knit the document, suppose you made a change somewhere else in the document, or you added something and you want to knit it again, then you have to recompute this each time, and it takes forever. Here is a way to avoid that. Cache equals true. What is this? This is also one of these chunk options. This is a way of storing temporary output from the computation of the code here in that chunk. So what happens now when I set cache equals true is that the first time I knit and this code is run, and it takes a long time. But the outcome of this, and in this case this variable here, will be stored in a temporary memory somewhere. And the next time you knit the document, this code will not be executed, but instead the result of the code will be loaded into memory again, so that the rest of the chunks can work, because this is probably important for the coming chunks, right? The code further down. So it means that when you re-knit the same document, it goes much faster the second time and so on. But notice that if you now make a change to the code in this chunk, then it must be run from the start again. So then it will take a long time again. So this caching will only be beneficial as long as the code inside is not changed. Then you will save a lot of time when you re-knit the document. Let me try to knit the document here now with this caching equals true. And you can see if we produce the output here, and notice now also a new folder appeared here with the name cache in it. And this is where now these temporary things are stored. So you must not delete this folder now if you want to benefit. So the next time I knit now, yeah, of course this one didn't take very much time, but if it had, this time it will go very quickly now, because I don't need to recompute it, because I know that the result of running this code is already stored in here somewhere. And it will make use of that instead. So that's a way to speed up your knitting, you could say. Okay, so let's see how we can avoid evaluating chunks altogether. Let me put in a new R chunk here now. And let's say that inside here, I have a for loop that goes through all the elements of this X that I created up here. And I do something to each element. Let me just print out each element. That's pretty silly, but it just illustrates that this piece of code is not really creating any new objects that is important for whatever comes after here now. It just do some routine things with this object here, and it prints out on the screen, or it saves to a file or something like that. This code here is not something I need to run each time I knit the document. I can of course do it, but imagine this will take a long time, right? And it will see, you get this silly output here now, but let's say this silly output was to some file then. Some files were created here. We saw this in assignment 1, that you had a loop where you created some files and saved them. This code is not something we need to recompute every time we knit the document. And it doesn't create anything either, so caching it will not be effective, but we can still turn it off. We can turn off the evaluation of the code. And that means the code in here will be shown in the report, but not executed. So if I re-knit here now, you will see that once we have the report, the code is shown, but it's not really executed, so there is no output showing here, right? And a lot of the code we have in our documents are of this type here. They don't produce anything which is crucial for the following code. They are just writing to file or something like that, which is enough to do once. And then you turn this evaluation off by setting eval equals false. Notice that you can run the code by clicking here. Yeah, of course we have to run this one first, and then you can run here to get this output. But when you knit the document, it is not executed. When you do the knitting, this one stops the execution. And this is quite important now, because in the reports you're going to make in assignment 2 and the following assignments will not only contain R code and R chunks, it will also contain shell code and shell chunks. Let me show what I mean. When we create a chunk up here, we don't have to choose R, which we have typically done before. We can also choose Python, or we can choose this bash. And this is shellcode chunks. And inside here, you should now type the code that you put into your shell scripts. And here I have this shell one such shell script, and this is just a copy from, let me click it open. This is just a copy of the first shell script in module 5. So this is not exactly what you should use in the assignment, of course, but I think that in the assignment you will do something similar. So you should you can start out with this and then just modify it accordingly. There are some other files you should use, right? And you should choose as input, and you will probably put them output somewhere else or whatever, I don't know. And you will use a Apptainer container instead of this module solution. Everything of this is in module 5. So I will not go into that now. I'm just saying that you have made yourself a shell script, and you go to the terminal window to actually run this shell script. How do we actually execute? Like this. sbatch and the name of the shell script. You see the name here, right? And then it's submitted to the queuing system, and then you see here that some output starts to come here. Now everything is running, and some output is appearing here in this folder. In your report, you have to show what you did to get these results, right? And then you simply just copy the code from the script, and you take it with you and paste it into a bash chunk like this. And now it is important that you turn the evaluation off. Here you should always have eval equals false, I would say. And why? Well, because first of all, these lines of code here, which are pretty important, they will not be read if you send this directly to the Unix system. This is for the Slurm, the queuing system. So when you submit it here, it's taken into consideration. But if you run it directly from RStudio here, it will not. These will be ignored. So no task will be reserved, no memory will be reserved, nothing of this will be working. And then who knows what happens when you come down here and start to try to execute this code. It may actually work. This particular document, I think, will probably work quite well. But in general, in your RMarkdown reports, always turn off the evaluation of the shellcodes because they should be executed by sbatching the script itself. Right? So this is just for showing the code. So you will typically, here is the code I used in my script called fastp.sh in order to, and so on. And then colon, and here comes the code. So if I knit this document now, you will see here. And here comes the code chunk. So that we can see what you did, but this is actually not executed when knitting the document. It's only executed when you sbatch your script here in the terminal window. So please use this eval equals false to turn off code that you want to show but not execute when knitting. But you will of course execute it outside the RMarkdown document. Okay, I think that was it for this time, and all these outputs here, you can do this yourself and see that you get it. And yeah, no, there is one more thing I should remember to mention. First of all, let me just delete this output again, because I can always rerun this shell script and recreate them. So it's a little bit, yeah, I don't need these ones either. It's nice to get it small and tidy. There was one more thing I would like to mention here now. How do you hand in your assignment in Canvas? Because this is now on Orion, right? This is the HTML file. Let's say you have done everything now and filled in all you should for assignment 2, and you knit the final version of the document and you get the HTML file like this. How do you get it into Canvas? Let me show you. You click here, select that file, then you go to this blue wheel over here and you select export. Export. And then you can see the selected files will be downloaded to your computer. Download. And then if you go into your downloads folder, you will see it here. being downloaded. And now you have it on your own computer, and then you can hand it in as any other file. So please do that. Any file you will want to take from Orion down to your own computer, you can just select them here and export. There are also other ways of doing it, but I would suggest you try this first. And if you have some problems, we can always look for other ways to transport files, you could say, from Orion down to your own computer. And then you hand it in the same way as any other file. Okay,